I gave him away. Those were the first words out of my daughter's mouth, and for 1 second, I honestly thought I had heard her wrong. Have you ever had a moment so shocking that your body reacts before your mind catches up? That was me. My hand slipped against the kitchen counter. My coffee mug tipped. It hit the floor and shattered, but I barely heard it. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. I just stared at Vanessa. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. My daughter stood there in the doorway like she had practiced this. 32 years old, pale, exhausted, but strangely calm. Too calm. Her hair was tied back. Her purse was already over her shoulder. Her overnight bag sat by the front door. And the bassinet in my living room, the one I had set up with my own hands just days earlier, was empty. I said, "What did you just say?" She looked straight at me and said it again. "I gave him away." This time there was no misunderstanding. My grandson Noah was 9 days old. 9 days. I felt my chest tighten so hard I had to grab the edge of the counter. "To who?" I shouted. And then Vanessa said the one sentence no grandmother, no mother, no human being should ever hear. "You'll never see him again." Now stop for a second and think about that. What kind of woman says that? What kind of daughter looks her 65-year-old mother in the eye and says, with a straight face, that her newborn baby is gone forever? That was the moment I realized this was not panic. This was not postpartum confusion. This was not an accident. This was meant to hurt me. My name is Elizabeth Stone. I'm 65 years old, a widow, retired after 38 years as a school secretary, and until that morning, I believed I understood the difference between family conflict and real evil. I was wrong. I have lived long enough to know that pain changes people. Losing my husband Thomas 8 years earlier had changed me. It had made me more careful, more anxious, more protective of the few people I had left. Maybe too protective. My daughter Vanessa had accused me of that for years. She said I hovered. She said I interfered. She said I always had to be needed. Maybe there was some truth in that. But I loved her. God help me, I loved her anyway. And when she got pregnant, I thought, foolishly maybe, that this baby might heal something between us. I drove her to appointments when Ryan Mercer, the father, forgot or claimed he was working. I stocked my hall closet with diapers, wipes, baby lotion, extra blankets. I dug out the cedar chest where I had kept a few things from Vanessa's infancy: a yellow knit sweater, a tiny white cap, a receiving blanket I had folded and refolded over the years like it still mattered to someone. And when Noah was born, I fell in love so fast it scared me. He had this little crease between his eyebrows, like he was already suspicious of the world. He liked being held upright against my shoulder. He stopped fussing when I hummed old hymns under my breath. I knew the shape of his cry by the third night. Hungry, wet, overtired. I knew him. So, when Vanessa told me she had given him away, she wasn't just dropping a bomb in the kitchen. She was reaching into my chest and trying to tear something out with her bare hands. But here's what made it worse. Some part of me had known something was wrong before she ever said those words. From the second Noah was born, Vanessa had been off. Not in some dramatic movie way, in small ways, real ways, dangerous ways. She wouldn't let anyone take pictures. She refused to post the birth announcement she had talked about for months. At the hospital, she insisted on handling every piece of discharge paperwork herself. She asked odd questions, too, about release forms, temporary guardianship, whether the father had to sign certain documents. At the time, I told myself she was overwhelmed. Scared, hormonal. But now, standing in that kitchen, looking at her empty bassinet and packed bag, I knew better. This had been building. And then she said something that chilled me even more. "Now you know what it feels like," she told me. That was not the voice of a frightened mother. That was revenge. I took one step toward her. "Where is Noah?" She crossed her arms. "Gone." My whole body was shaking now. Vanessa, don't do this. Don't play games with me. Her mouth twitched. Not quite a smile. Something uglier. You always had to have everything your way. Every room, every decision, every life. Not this time. That's when I understood. This wasn't about the baby alone. This was about years of anger, years of blame, years of things she had never said out loud until they curdled into something poisonous. And that was the moment I said the one thing she did not expect. I looked her dead in the eye and said, very quietly, "Then you'd better pray you're lying, because I already know something you don't." For the first time, her face changed. Just for a second, confidence cracked. And when her phone started vibrating on the kitchen table, both of us looked at it at the same time. The name glowing on the screen made my blood run cold. Ryan. Ryan's name lit up on the screen, and suddenly the room felt smaller. That was the first thing I noticed. Not the sound of the phone buzzing against the table, not Vanessa's sharp inhale, not even the fact that my grandson was still missing. It was the room itself. My own kitchen, the one I had stood in for decades, suddenly felt airless, like the walls had moved in while I wasn't looking. Why was Ryan calling now? And why did Vanessa look scared? That question hit me hard, because up until then, she had looked cold, deliberate. Cruel, yes, but steady, the kind of steady that comes from believing you're in control. But the second Ryan's name flashed across that screen, something in her face shifted. Her jaw tightened. Her eyes darted. For the first time since she'd said, "I gave him away," she didn't look like the one holding all the cards. She lunged for the phone. I grabbed it first. "Give me that," she snapped. "No!" My voice came out sharper than I expected. Harder. Not loud this time, just final. The phone kept buzzing in my hand, vibrating so violently it almost slipped through my fingers. Ryan Mercer, 34 years old, good-looking in that careless, unreliable way some women mistake for charm. Noah's father. Sometimes present, often late. Full of promises when it suited him and excuses when it didn't. He had drifted in and out of Vanessa's pregnancy like a man testing the temperature of a pool he wasn't sure he wanted to jump into. And now he was calling at the exact moment my daughter told me my grandson was gone. That was no coincidence. I answered, but I didn't put him on speaker. Not yet. "Elizabeth?" he said immediately, voice tight, breathless. "Where's Vanessa?" Interesting, isn't it? Not "hello," not "is everything okay?" Not even "did she tell you?" Just "where's Vanessa?" "She's right here," I said, "and you're going to tell me where my grandson is." There was a pause on the line. Not a confused pause, a guilty one. That was all I needed. Vanessa was already moving toward me. "Hang up," she hissed. "Hang up right now." I took a step back and held the phone away from her. "Ryan," I said, each word slow and sharp. "Did you know about this?" Another pause, and then he said the worst possible thing. "She told you?" Not, "What are you talking about?" Not, "What happened?" "She told you?" My stomach dropped, because there it was. Proof. He knew. Vanessa stopped moving. The fight went out of her shoulders for half a second, replaced by something uglier than anger, panic. I put the call on speaker. "Tell me exactly what you know," I said. Ryan exhaled hard. I could hear traffic in the background, the thud of a car door, the scrape of shoes. "I'm on my way over." That's not an answer. "I know," he shot back, "and this is not how this was supposed to happen." That line landed in the center of my kitchen like a lit match. This was not how this was supposed to happen. So there was a plan, a real one. Vanessa gave a bitter laugh, but there was no humor in it. "Oh, now you care how it happened?" Ryan's voice rose. "You were supposed to wait." There are moments when the truth doesn't arrive all at once. It comes in pieces, fragments, tone, timing, one wrong sentence after another until the shape of something terrible begins to appear. That's what this was. I looked at my daughter. Wait for what? She didn't answer. Vanessa? Still nothing. That silence told me more than words could have. I turned back to the phone. Ryan, start talking. He lowered his voice, but not enough to hide the fear in it. I said I'd explain when I got there. No, I said. You explain now. He muttered something under his breath. Then, she wasn't supposed to tell you until everything was settled. Settled. Do you hear how cold that word sounds in a situation like this? As if my 9-day-old grandson was a bank transfer, a lease agreement, something to be arranged neatly and filed away. I felt my pulse hammering in my neck. What exactly was being settled? I asked. Vanessa snapped before he could answer. Nothing was being settled. He's lying, just like always. Ryan barked a humorless laugh. I'm lying? You're the one who showed up and dumped the baby. Don't you dare, she shouted, taking a step forward. Don't you dare act like this was my idea alone. And there it was. Not a misunderstanding, not a momentary breakdown, a shared secret. My eyes moved between the phone in my hand and my daughter's face, and for the first time, I saw the outline of what this really was. Not just a mother in crisis, but two adults tangled in some arrangement they were both trying to control. Where is Noah? I asked again. This time my voice shook. Not with weakness, with fury. Ryan didn't answer immediately, and Vanessa folded her arms as if she could somehow shrink behind her own defiance. That was when another memory slammed into me. The hospital. Marlene Pike, the charge nurse, had looked uneasy the day Vanessa was discharged. I remembered it now with painful clarity. Marlene had walked me toward the elevators and said carefully, "Keep an eye on her, Elizabeth. She's saying different things to different people." At the time, I thought she meant postpartum nerves, confusion, exhaustion. But what if she had meant more? What if the warning had been right there in front of me and I had chosen not to see it? I reached for the landline with my free hand. Vanessa saw what I was doing immediately. Who are you calling? Marlene. That got a reaction. Not from Ryan, from Vanessa. Her face changed again, this time in a way that made my blood go cold. Not rage, not even panic. Fear. Real fear. Don't, she said quickly. Mom, don't call the hospital. Why not? Why would a woman who had just confessed to giving away her newborn be afraid of a nurse hearing about it? Unless the hospital already knew something. Unless paperwork had already been questioned. Unless Vanessa had been laying the groundwork for this before she ever brought Noah through my front door. I pressed the numbers. Ryan was still on the line, cursing softly now, and Vanessa was staring at me like she was trying to decide whether to stop me or run. Marlene answered on the third ring. Elizabeth? Her voice was alert. Too alert. I swallowed hard. Marlene, I said, I need you to tell me the truth. Did my daughter try to make arrangements for that baby before she left your ward? There was a long silence, and then Marlene said, very quietly, Elizabeth, is Noah okay? That question hit harder than anything else so far, because people do not ask that unless they already suspect the answer may be no. I closed my eyes for 1 second. Just one. When I opened them, Vanessa was no longer looking angry. She looked cornered, and Marlene hadn't even said the worst part yet. Elizabeth, is Noah okay? That was the question Marlene asked me, and I'm telling you right now, it changed the temperature of the entire room. Because up until that second, this still felt, barely, like a family disaster. A vicious one, yes, a cruel one, but still private, still containable, still something happening inside my kitchen between me, my daughter, and the father of her child. But when a maternity nurse lowers her voice and asks whether a 9-day-old baby is okay, you understand something immediately. This is bigger than the house, bigger than the argument, bigger than hurt feelings. Something official had already started moving. I tightened my grip on the receiver. No, I said, not taking my eyes off Vanessa. I don't know if he is. She says she gave him away. Marlene inhaled sharply. I heard papers rustling on her end, then a chair scrape back. Vanessa took a step toward me. Stop talking. I held up one hand without looking at her. No. Ryan was still on speaker from my cell phone, and now he sounded like he was moving faster, maybe jogging, maybe fumbling with keys. Elizabeth, don't say anything else until I get there. That alone told me too much. Innocent people do not beg for silence when a newborn's whereabouts are in question. Marlene spoke carefully. I can't disclose everything over the phone, but yes, there were concerns. There it was. Not my imagination, not my overprotective mother instincts. Concerns. My knees almost weakened, but anger held me upright. What kind of concerns? I asked. Vanessa's voice rose. You can't do this! You can't drag strangers into this! Strangers? That word nearly made me laugh. A nurse who delivered your son into the world is not a stranger. A grandmother trying to find a missing newborn is not meddling. And the second Vanessa said that, I knew she was no longer trying to justify herself. She was trying to contain damage. Marlene continued, still measured, still professional. Your daughter asked several legal questions before discharge, about private placement, temporary custody, whether a father's consent was always required, whether a baby could leave with a relative if the mother signed first. Every sentence hit like a hammer. I looked at Vanessa, and she looked away. That was new too. My daughter had always been confrontational when she believed she was right. Even as a child, if she broke a lamp, she'd argue about why the lamp shouldn't have been there in the first place. If she skipped school, she'd turn it into an indictment of the school system. She did not look away, not unless she knew she was losing. I said, and nobody stopped her? Marlene answered quickly. We referred her to social work. A consult was done. Now Ryan swore loudly from the phone. Vanessa spun toward my cell on the table. Shut up, Ryan! His voice came back hard. You said they didn't flag it. Flag it. That word rang in my ears. Marlene heard it too. Her tone changed slightly. Sharper now. Elizabeth, who else is there? Ryan Mercer, I said. And Vanessa. A beat of silence. Then Marlene said something that made the hair rise on my arms. The social worker noted your daughter may not have been alone when she signed part of the final release paperwork. I felt the room tilt. Ryan stopped talking. Vanessa stopped moving. Even the old refrigerator hum in the corner suddenly sounded louder. Not alone. I turned slowly toward the glowing phone on the table. Ryan was breathing hard, and for the first time since I had known him, he did not sound slick. He did not sound charming. He sounded trapped. What does that mean? I asked. Marlene hesitated. I'm saying she gave one version of events to staff, then a different version later. At one point, she said the baby would be staying with you temporarily. Later, she suggested he might be with paternal family, and there was confusion over who had reviewed the packet with her. Paternal family. There it was, the phrase that cracked the whole thing open. I looked at Vanessa. Who? She folded her arms, but it looked forced now, as if she were trying to hold herself together physically. Nobody you need to know. No, I said, stepping closer. You do not get to stand in my kitchen and say that to me, not after what you've done. Who has Noah? Her eyes flashed. You think this is about Noah? It's not. That line chilled me more than anything else she had said. Because what mother says that? What mother admits, even by accident, that her newborn is not the center of what's happening? A wounded one, a reckless one, a dangerous one. And in that instant, I saw the truth more clearly than before. This wasn't just a desperate act. This was retaliation. Noah was the method. I was the target. Marlene was still on the line. Elizabeth, if the baby's location is unknown, you need to document everything and consider calling authorities. Ryan cut in immediately. No police. I turned toward the phone. And why not? His answer came too fast. Because he's safe. There was silence after that. The kind of silence that doesn't calm you down. The kind that confirms what you feared. You don't say he's safe unless you know where he is. Vanessa closed her eyes for one brief second, like she wanted to disappear. Then she opened them and glared at the phone. You idiot! That was enough for me. I picked up my cell, switched Ryan fully to speaker, and said, "Say it again, out loud, in front of her." He didn't speak. "Ryan!" Another breath. Then, finally, "He's not with a stranger." Marlene let out a quiet exhale on the other end. Vanessa muttered a curse under her breath. Not with a stranger, meaning with someone. A specific someone. A planned someone. The room pulsed with the weight of it. "Who has my grandson?" I asked. Ryan said nothing. Vanessa did. Not because she wanted to confess, because she wanted to strike first. "You want to know?" she said, turning to me with eyes bright and furious. "Fine. He's with people who actually understand what family means." I stared at her. "Don't you dare," I said softly. But she was on a roll now, voice shaking with rage and something uglier beneath it. "You always had to own everything. Every holiday, every decision, every crisis. The baby was barely here, and you were already acting like he was yours." The words hurt because some part of them touched something real. I had been involved. I had been hovering. I had been terrified Vanessa would fall apart and Noah would pay for it. But that truth did not excuse this. "Where," I repeated, "is Noah?" Ryan finally broke. "With my aunt." Vanessa whipped toward the phone so fast her chair nearly tipped. "You promised you wouldn't say that!" he shouted back. "Because this is out of control." His aunt, not an agency, not a church, not a legal surrender. A relative. A hidden handoff. And just like that, the nightmare became even worse, because family secrets are the hardest kind to untangle. Everybody lies. Everybody thinks they're helping. And by the time the truth surfaces, the damage is already done. My mouth went dry. "Name." Ryan hesitated. Then, "Denise Halpern." I didn't know the name. That frightened me more than if I had. It meant my grandson had been taken to someone outside my world, outside my sight, outside any reach I understood. "Address." No answer. "Ryan!" He exhaled shakily. "I'll give it to you when I get there. But listen to me first. Denise called me 20 minutes ago. She found something in Noah's discharge packet." I frowned. "What are you talking about?" His voice dropped. "She said it changes everything." I turned to Vanessa, and for the first time since this nightmare began, my daughter didn't look angry. She looked terrified, as if she knew exactly what Denise had found. "She said it changes everything." That was what Ryan told me, and I want you to picture the silence that followed, because silence can be louder than screaming when the right words land in the wrong room. Vanessa didn't deny it. She didn't ask what Denise had found. She didn't laugh. She didn't call Ryan dramatic. She just stood there, staring at me with the color draining out of her face. And that told me one thing immediately. Whatever was in that discharge packet, my daughter already knew about it. Ryan arrived less than 10 minutes later, but it felt like an hour. Those 10 minutes were some of the longest of my life. Nobody sat down, nobody calmed down. Vanessa paced from the sink to the back window and back again, arms folded so tightly across her chest she looked like she was bracing against the cold. I stood by the kitchen table with both phones in front of me, one hand pressed flat against the wood just to steady myself. Every few seconds, my eyes went to the empty bassinet in the next room. 9 days old. That fact kept repeating in my mind like a hammer. 9 days old, and already passed around in secret. 9 days old, and already used as leverage. 9 days old, and somewhere out there with a woman I had never even met. When Ryan finally pushed through the front door, he looked like a man who had run straight into his own guilt. Work boots, dust on his jeans, sweat at his temples. He was holding a manila folder in one hand and he kept gripping it so tightly the edges bent inward. No charm, no swagger, no excuses ready on his tongue. Just fear. Vanessa saw the folder and took one fast step toward him. "Why did you bring that here?" That was the first thing she said. Not, "Is Noah okay?" Not, "What did Denise say? Why did you bring that here?" Ryan looked at her like he was seeing her clearly for the first time, and whatever he saw, he did not like it. "Because this is over," he said. "That's why." I stepped between them before the whole thing exploded again. "Give it to me." He hesitated just long enough to make me furious. Then he handed it over. The envelope inside was sealed, cream-colored, and old-fashioned in a way people barely use anymore. My name was written across the front in neat blue ink, Elizabeth Stone. My heart gave one hard, painful thud. I knew that handwriting, not because I'd seen it often, but because it belonged to someone tied to a chapter of my life I had boxed up emotionally years ago. Janice Bell, the longtime assistant to my late husband Thomas's attorney. I looked up slowly. "Where did this come from?" Ryan rubbed a hand over his mouth. "Denise said it was tucked into the discharge packet. She found it when she was checking Noah's follow-up papers." Vanessa said nothing. That was answer enough. I turned to my daughter. "You saw this?" Her jaw tightened. "I saw an envelope." "Addressed to me?" No reply. "Did you open it?" "No." I studied her face. She might have been telling the truth about that one detail. Maybe she had not opened it. Maybe she had just taken everything and hidden it before anyone else could see it. That would fit. Vanessa had always been reckless, but she wasn't patient. If she had seen something addressed to me while she was rushing to disappear with the baby, she may have shoved it aside without reading it closely. And if that was true, then my earlier words to her in the kitchen had mattered more than she realized. Because I had known something she didn't. Not the exact contents, not yet, but I had known there were loose ends tied to Thomas's estate. Probate corrections, old documents that had dragged through legal channels much longer than they should have. Thomas had handled money quietly, carefully. He believed in systems, in contingencies, in paperwork that outlived emotion. I broke the seal with unsteady fingers. Inside was a notarized letter and a copy of a trust amendment. As I read the first lines, the room disappeared. Thomas, years before his stroke, had established a family trust with a specific clause that would activate upon the birth of Vanessa's biological child. It wasn't vast, but it was significant, enough to cover housing support, medical care, education, and a protected monthly allowance for the child's welfare. And the trustee appointed to oversee those assets until the child reached 25 was not Vanessa. It was me, Elizabeth Stone. I read it twice, then a third time, because in moments like that, your eyes stop trusting the page. The amendment had finally been processed after Noah's birth certificate triggered a notification through the estate file. That was why the letter had surfaced now. That was why it had been attached to the packet meant to go home with the family. And then I reached the line that changed everything in practical terms. The trust required verified reporting of the child's legal residence and custodial status to the trustee, meaning me. My hand dropped to my side. Ryan stared. "What?" I looked up at him, then at Vanessa. "This baby cannot simply disappear," I said. Nobody spoke, so I continued, my voice steadier now, because for the first time since Vanessa had opened her mouth in my kitchen, the chaos was taking shape. "There is a legal mechanism tied to Noah's existence. His residence has to be documented. His care has to be documented. Whoever has him, whoever thinks they can hide him, can't do that for long." Ryan blinked hard, processing. Vanessa just stared, and then I saw it hit her. That terrible realization. She had done all this to erase me from the equation, to make me powerless, to make sure I would never see him again. And instead, without even realizing it, she had triggered the exact thing that tied me to Noah's future in writing. Her secret was never going to hold. But the worst part wasn't even the money. It was what came next. Ryan swallowed. "There's more." Of course there was. There is always more when people have been lying for days. He looked miserable now, like the effort of keeping everything hidden had finally broken his back. Denise called a lawyer when she found the envelope. She got scared. She said if this placement wasn't formalized, she could be accused of taking custody under false pretenses. She should be scared, I said. Vanessa snapped back to life. She was helping. No, I said, turning on her so fast she stepped back. She was lied to. That landed, because it was true. I could see the whole thing now, or most of it. Vanessa had gone to Ryan's aunt under some story about needing temporary help. Ryan had gone along with it because he thought placing Noah with his side of the family gave him leverage. Denise had probably believed she was stepping into a family emergency, not a hidden custody scheme. And all of them had treated me like the obstacle to be managed, instead of the person who would actually protect that child. Then, Ryan said one more thing. Denise also said Vanessa told her there was another reason she had to move fast. My eyes narrowed. What reason? He looked at Vanessa before answering, and that told me he was afraid to say it in front of her. Ryan, I said. He let out a breath. She said she was terrified of what would happen when you found out what the DNA test showed. The room went dead still. DNA test? I turned slowly toward my daughter. Vanessa's face had gone from pale to almost gray, and just like that, what I had thought was the full story cracked open one more time. This wasn't only about revenge. There was another secret, another lie, another reason she had tried to make Noah disappear before the truth could catch up to her. I took one step toward her. What DNA test? She opened her mouth, and for the first time all day, she looked like she had no idea what lie to choose. What DNA test? I asked my daughter that question, and for a moment, Vanessa just stood there with her lips parted and no sound coming out. All that anger, all that poison, all that control she had been clinging to since this nightmare started. Gone. And when someone like Vanessa goes silent, you know the truth is close. Ryan looked miserable. Vanessa looked trapped. I was standing in my own kitchen with a legal trust document in one hand, a missing baby in another county, and the awful understanding that the story I had been told was still not the whole story. So I asked again, what DNA test? This time, my voice was lower, colder. Vanessa swallowed. It was nothing. Nothing. Have you ever noticed how people only call something nothing when they're terrified of what happens if they say it plainly? Ryan let out a bitter laugh. It wasn't nothing. She turned on him instantly. You don't get to talk. No, he said, shaking his head. I think I do, considering you used it to control me for months. That line told me more than either of them realized. I looked from one to the other, and the shape of it started coming together before either of them admitted it. During the pregnancy, there had been a period when Vanessa and Ryan were separated. Not cleanly, not maturely, just the usual ugly half-breakup where people still text, still accuse, still circle each other like they want the fight more than the peace. In that window, Vanessa had been involved with someone else. Briefly, quietly, and rather than tell the truth and face the uncertainty, she had kept both possibilities alive. Not because she didn't know what she was doing, because uncertainty gave her power. Ryan finally said it out loud. She got a prenatal paternity test, privately. I stared at Vanessa. She looked away. That was answer number one. Ryan continued. She never told you because she didn't want anybody asking questions. And she didn't tell me the result because as long as I wasn't sure, I kept trying. I kept showing up. I kept paying. I kept chasing her. There it was, a weaponized secret. I felt physically sick. So, what was the result? I asked. Vanessa's eyes flashed, but the fight behind them was weak now. He's Noah's father. Ryan nodded once, hard. I am. That was the final piece. Not that Ryan was not the father. That would have been simpler in a way. Cleaner. No, the truth was uglier because it was psychological. Vanessa had known Ryan was the father and had hidden the certainty because it let her manipulate him. It let her keep him nervous and attached. It let her threaten distance whenever she wanted control. And when Noah was born and the trust paperwork surfaced, paperwork that would legally bind his existence to me as trustee, Vanessa panicked. Because suddenly she was losing control on every side. Ryan had legal standing as the father. I had legal standing through the trust and prior caregiving involvement. And Noah, simply by existing on paper, had become impossible to quietly move out of reach forever. That was why she had acted fast. That was why she took the discharge folder. That was why she ran to Denise. That was why she stood in my kitchen and said, "You'll never see him again." It was revenge, yes, but it was also desperation. She was trying to get ahead of the truth before the truth could trap her. For a few seconds, nobody spoke. Then I asked the only question that mattered. "Is Noah safe right now?" Ryan nodded. "Yes." I turned to the phone and called Denise myself. She answered immediately, like she had been waiting. "Elizabeth?" "Yes," I said. "I need you to tell me exactly what's happening with my grandson." Her voice was tired, shaken, but not evasive. That mattered. "He's safe. He's fed. He's sleeping on and off. I took him to the pediatric appointment this afternoon because the jaundice follow-up was in the packet. He's okay." The relief that hit me then was so violent it almost took me down. I had been standing on pure adrenaline for what felt like hours, but hearing that one word, "okay," broke something open inside me. I grabbed the back of a chair and sat down hard. I started crying. Not elegantly, not quietly, not like women cry in movies. I cried like a 65-year-old widow whose family had just ripped itself open around a 9-day-old baby. I cried because Noah was alive and safe. I cried because Vanessa had done this. I cried because some part of me knew this disaster had not begun that morning. It had been forming for years, inside old resentments and unspoken blame, and every bitter thing left to rot between a mother and daughter who never learned how to be honest without hurting each other. Denise kept speaking gently on the line. She explained that Vanessa had arrived at her house claiming this was temporary, that Ryan knew, that I was overbearing, unstable, and likely to interfere. Denise had believed she was helping in a family emergency, but once she found the envelope, once she saw the legal implications and realized the placement had not been formally documented, she got scared. She called a lawyer. She called Ryan. She had not called the police only because Noah was physically safe and she wanted the adults to resolve it before making the situation worse for him. That was the moment I stopped seeing Denise as part of the scheme and started seeing her as what she really was. A woman who had been misled and had enough sense to recognize danger once she saw it. I thanked her for taking care of him. Then I did what should have been done from the beginning. I called a family law attorney. Not tomorrow, not later, right then. Speakerphone, notes, timeline, names, exact statements. The attorney told me to document everything immediately and to arrange voluntary disclosure with child services and law enforcement before anyone else turned this into a criminal standoff. That way, the focus would stay where it belonged, stabilizing Noah, clarifying custody, and preventing further concealment. So, that is what I did. The next hours were not cinematic. They were paperwork, statements, calls, and consequences. And that matters. Because real life does not end when the secret comes out. Real life begins there. By that evening, Child Protective Services had opened an emergency case. Because Noah was already physically settled with Denise and had been medically seen, they did not yank him out in dramatic fashion. They assessed immediate safety first. Denise cooperated fully. She showed texts from Vanessa. She admitted Ryan had framed the arrangement as temporary family support, not a secret transfer meant to sever contact. Her honesty protected her. Ryan, however, did not walk away clean. He had participated in moving the baby without formal guardianship papers, without clear written consent, and while concealing key facts. No, he was not hauled off in handcuffs, and that would have felt false anyway. But the consequences were real. His future custody claims would now be judged against that conduct. He had damaged his own credibility before any court ever even heard him. And Vanessa? Vanessa faced the hardest fallout of all. Not because anyone wanted revenge on her, but because her actions demanded accountability. A newborn had been used as an instrument of punishment. She had misled relatives, concealed paperwork, manipulated the father, and created enough instability that protective services could not simply trust her word going forward. She was ordered into a mental health evaluation. The court was informed of possible postpartum concerns, but also of deliberate retaliatory behavior. Those are not the same thing, and they should not be treated as the same thing. Her pain may have been real, her instability may have been real, but so was the harm she caused. For 48 hours, Noah remained with Denise under supervision while emergency kinship review moved forward. That part was difficult for me. People imagine justice as instant. It isn't. Systems take time, even when a baby is involved. But there was logic to it. He was medically stable. Denise was cooperating. The house had been assessed quickly. Then, because I had an established caregiving role, a prepared home, a clean record, and the trust responsibilities now formally attached to Noah's welfare, temporary kinship guardianship was granted to me pending a full hearing. When they placed him back in my arms, I thought my heart would break from the force of the relief. He smelled like formula and baby soap and something warm and new and impossibly fragile. He made that tiny snuffling sound newborns make when they're settling into sleep, and I pressed my cheek against the top of his head and closed my eyes. You spend enough time terrified you'll never see a child again, and even the weight of 7 pounds feels like a miracle. But that wasn't the end. It couldn't be. Because the reveal had happened, yes, the legal truth had surfaced, the baby was safe. But the aftermath still had to unfold. That is where people's lives actually change. Ryan's family learned what he had done, and the version of himself he liked to project, the calm, reasonable one, did not survive contact with the facts. His Aunt Denise, to her credit, remained involved, but now as an ally to Noah rather than to Ryan's schemes. She became one of the few people in that whole mess who earned my trust. Vanessa's friends heard the real story in pieces. Some drifted away immediately. It is one thing to sympathize with a struggling new mother. It is another to learn she used her newborn son to punish her own mother and manipulate the child's father. Public sympathy shrank fast once the details solidified. And personally, my life changed overnight. At 65, I became something I never expected to be again, the primary caregiver of an infant. That sounds beautiful when people say it casually. Sometimes it was. Sometimes I would stand in the nursery at 4 o'clock in the morning, warming a bottle while Noah fussed in that outraged little way babies do, and I would feel overwhelmed by love so fierce it almost made me laugh. Other times, my back ached, my hands shook from exhaustion, and I sat at the kitchen table surrounded by pediatric appointment slips, court notices, trust forms, and cans of formula, wondering how a retirement I once imagined as quiet had turned into this. But even then, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. He was safe. Weeks later, there was a supervised meeting with Vanessa. No shouting this time. No performances. No sharp little smiles. Just 2 women sitting across from each other in a visitation room that smelled faintly of disinfectant and old coffee. She looked smaller somehow. Not physically, spiritually, as if the collapse of her control had left her with nothing to hide behind. I told her the truth. I told her I had made mistakes as a mother. I had been controlling at times, fearful, over-involved. After Thomas died, I had tried to hold the family together so tightly that I probably made her feel like she couldn't breathe. Those things were real. But I also told her another truth. None of that gave her the right to use Noah as a blade. She cried then, quietly at first, then harder, and finally, she admitted what I had known without hearing for years, that every kindness from me during the pregnancy had felt like an invasion because she had already decided I believed she would fail. She had let that feeling grow until hurting me felt like power. Not peace, not freedom, power. I did not forgive her in some grand, dramatic instant. That would have been false. What I gave her was a boundary. I told her recovery, trust, reconciliation, whatever shape any of those things might one day take, would depend on one thing only: whether she could learn to put Noah above her own need to win. That was all, and that was enough. In the months that followed, the court maintained temporary guardianship with me while Vanessa remained in treatment and completed parenting evaluations. Ryan was granted supervised visitation after full cooperation and documentation. Denise stayed in Noah's life, carefully, appropriately, and honestly. The trust was activated properly and used exactly as Thomas intended, for Noah's care, housing stability, medical support, and eventually education. The house changed too. The spare room became a nursery for real this time, not just a hopeful grandmother's setup. The mobile over the crib turned in the morning light. Fresh bottles lined the drying rack by the sink. The refrigerator filled with normal old woman things: soup containers, applesauce, blood pressure medication. But now, clipped to the front, were infant vaccination schedules, visitation calendars, and legal reminders. My life was not easier. It was fuller, heavier, stranger, and alive. One morning, just before dawn, I was in the rocking chair by the window with Noah asleep against my chest. The house was quiet except for the soft rattle of the heater and his tiny breathing. My phone lit up on the side table with a court notification confirming the extension of my temporary guardianship. I looked at the screen, then at him. This child who had been turned into a threat, a secret, a bargaining chip, a punishment. And yet here he was, warm, safe, home. I kissed the top of his head and whispered, "You are not disappearing again." That was the truth. That was the ending. And that was the first moment in all of it that felt like peace.